you look here, one of the nice things about using GIS and remote is that one of the big things that colleagues do first is to get the underlying geology, slope, soil type, everything of that sort, waterworks, a variety of things, and then get the boundaries of the forest, and those takes a long time to figure that out. And then stable forests are like in the middle, there's not much change. At clearing, you can see here up in the middle that that's being cleared in all sorts of little patches. Well, what's interesting there is the clearing is occurring and the boundary makes no difference. The clearing is, there's just no boundary impact. It's obviously, there's roads and there's activity and things you can achieve. Similarly, down here, there's regrowth, but it's not only in the forest, it's just in that region, regrowth is occurring. And this is an area where they have a very big budget and are able to invest in a lot of monitoring. So what we find is multiple patterns, stable forests in the core, but the park dogs are not able to control harvesting all the way along, even though they have a big budget. And when we look at ground studies, and my colleagues, and I haven't done any in this area, but my colleagues have, we find all sorts of harvesting and other things going on that shouldn't. For example, this is a path that divides the community from the forest. And those women are carrying out thatch, and they do that every day. And the gentleman here is a forest guard, and this is one of my colleagues, Rusha they was in the field, and just watching them carry it out every day, and the guard's kind of helpless because if they start yelling for the community, people get upset with them for doing this. Similarly, the park border is right here, up there. This is the entrance to the park, and they're going across it, and every day they take the cattle in. And again, every day you see multiple people taking their cattle in. So the border isn't too much. And so let's then go on to two more protected areas in India. We look at the Mahendra Wildlife Sanctuary, a national park with a substantial budget on the north, and then a biosphere reserve on the very limited budget on the south. You find that there's a difference when they have a good budget. You go up to the north, and you're not there. See, there the boundary is making a difference. It's stable inside in the north. But there's all sorts of clearing going on down here where the boundary isn't making the difference. And so two forests side by side, one of which is really quite stable and the other not. In the upper one, they fenced it all. And of course that keeps the wildlife in, as well as keeping people out. But it's expensive to fence everything like that and then maintain it. In the south, my colleagues discovered that people had discovered a brand new way of harvesting. See the bicycle here and the hole? Well, if two bicycles, they take the hole out, and then two people go in and they take out a big log and they put it between them and they bike it out, they can take logs out. And this is a pile of bicycles that over time they've collected, huge pile. So the profit from being able to do that has to be pretty high, or people wouldn't be going into this amount. The buses also have been crating stuff out, and they were confiscated. So huge input to stealing from the forest. So we have a situation where some of the forests that are government-owned are doing very well, some are not. And so now let's just move for a few minutes to Chitwan Valley in Nepal, and now looking at forest and forest organization rather than water, like I mentioned earlier. There are buffer zone forests located right next to what was the Royal Palace for a long time, Royal Forest. The Royal Chitwan National Park it is now. And it has received a lot of external funding. And they've established community forests, and they're finding some of them are just doing very well. And there are some community forests in the area that are doing very well, but lots of mixture of what's going on. So the Rapti River is that blue one going along, and then the Royal Chitwan Park is below the river. And what you can see is that in some of the buffer forests, all the beams, those are buffer forests, there's regrowth in some of them, but there's clearing in others. So they are not uniformly doing, and they're getting a lot of money. And so our colleagues in Nepal are quite worried of when the money dries up, will they be able to sustain themselves over time? But they are doing pretty well. Over here in the community forests, again, a number of them are doing very well, but there's clearing in others. So that we're finding both successes and failures in both. So now I've kind of given you a very quick overview of our findings from the air. And what we're finding is government forests, big ones with good budgets, are able to sustain forest resources over time. Some community forests are better managed, while others are having troubles. We don't have a panacea. What we are finding from the field is that when people in the field monitor one another, that's when forest and water resources are sustained over time. Right now, our theory does not talk about self-monitoring. The presumption is the government comes in, it has a sanction, and it monitors. And that's not what we're finding in the successful systems out there. When the government does monitor heavily, you can have a lot more conflict. Because that means they march with guns and all sorts of other things, and the community will wait until they're gone, and then they don't trust them, so they go in. So now I'd like to go back to groundwork, now related to forestry. We've been establishing an international network of research centers, the International Forestry Resources and Institutions Program. And we have a number of collaborative research centers in a number of countries. I won't read them, but in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. And we're doing studies in the US. We've developed a common set of protocols. Ecologists taught us how to measure trees and biodiversity and biomass and stocking levels and all of this. And then we're doing in-depth interviews with communities. So we're getting at governance and socioeconomic. And again, now we've been able to get a little bit more of a statistical information on things like we did with the irrigation. And we're looking at forest in terms of does the designation of it, being a forest that is owned by the government or by a community or private, make a difference. When you do this at one time period, when you cross zones, you have a very difficult time using biomass, height, etc., because the subtropical forest has got entirely different kind of conditions than dry. So we ask the forester to evaluate vegetation density in the forest after they've finished all of the 30 plots or 40 plots that they've done in a forest.